The boy looked like he'd been chewed up by the territory and spat back out. That was Edna Marsh's first thought when she saw him come up the road. Not running, not riding, just walking with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who had learned not to waste what little he had left. He was young, maybe 20, maybe younger if life had aged him early, which out here in the Colorado high country in 1879, it usually did. His boots had been resoled with what appeared to be saddle leather and wire. His coat was held together at one shoulder with a piece of fence twine. He had no horse, no pack animal, no visible weapon, and the particular look about the eyes of a person who has spent too many nights deciding whether the ground or the cold was the bigger problem. Edna watched him from the kitchen window. Behind her, her husband Walter sat at the table with the ranch ledger open in front of him, and the expression he always wore when the numbers said something he didn't want to hear, which lately was every morning. "Someone coming up the road," Edna said. Walter didn't look up. "Rider?" "Walker." That made him look up. They had been on this land for 31 years. Walter and Edna Marsh, the Broken Bow Ranch, 400 acres of mountain grass and creek bottom at the foot of the San Juan Range. They had built it from 2 rooms and a prayer into something real, something that fed them and 30 head of cattle and one very opinionated border collie named Hector. They had raised 2 sons here. One of them was in Denver now, working a railroad job and sending money at Christmas. The other one was in the ground, on the hill behind the barn, taken by a fever the winter of '74 at the age of 19. They were 63 and 61 years old, respectively, and they were tired in the way that only people who have worked hard and lost hard can be tired. Not lazy, not beaten, just running on a kind of stubborn momentum that has long since replaced actual energy. And they could no longer run this ranch alone. That was the truth sitting at the bottom of Walter's ledger every morning, heavy as a stone. The boy reached the gate and stopped. He took off his hat, a gesture so automatic and old-fashioned that Edna blinked. Then he looked at the house, and at the barn, and at the cattle visible in the far pasture, and she could see him thinking, taking stock, the way a man looks at a thing he is trying to understand before he speaks about it. Then he walked to the door and knocked. Edna opened it before Walter could say not to. "Ma'am." He held his hat in both hands. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought, 19 at most, possibly less. Brown hair gone shaggy under the hat line, a jaw that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to produce a beard or just a suggestion of one. He was thin in the way that means hungry, not built, and there was a cut along his left cheekbone that was maybe 2 days old and hadn't been tended to properly. His eyes, though, were steady. Not the darting, calculating eyes of a man looking for what he could take, just steady, a little careful. The eyes of someone who had learned that the first few seconds of a conversation often determined everything that came after. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I've been on the road since Durango. I can see you're running cattle." He glanced toward the pasture. "I can see from here that your south fence line is down in 2 places, and your water trough by the near barn is cracked. You're losing probably half what you're putting in." He looked back at her. "I know cattle. I know fence work, and I know water systems, and I know horses. If you let me stay, I'll take care of your herd." Edna looked at him. "In exchange for what?" she asked. "Meals, a place to sleep, that's all." From behind her, Walter's chair scraped back. He came to the door and stood beside Edna, and the boy's posture changed slightly. Not fearful, just more formal, the way it does when the person with the authority enters the room. Walter Marsh was a large man, or had been. The years had taken some of the breadth from his shoulders and added it to his middle, but he still had the hands and the bearing of someone who had built things with his body for decades. He looked at the boy the way he looked at everything. Slowly, thoroughly, without hurry. "Where are you from?" Walter asked. "Kansas, originally. I've been working ranches since I was 15. "Working or drifting?" A pause. Honest. "Some of both, sir." "What's in Durango?" "Nothing anymore." Walter's eyes moved across the boy. The patched coat, the resoled boots, the old cut on his face. "What happened to your cheek?" "Disagreement," the boy said. "Other man looks worse. I didn't start it, and I finished it as fast as I could." Something shifted in Walter's face. Not warmth, exactly. More like recognition. He'd known men like that. He'd been one once. "What's your name?" "Callum. Callum Reed." Walter looked at Edna. Edna looked at Walter. 31 years of marriage had made this a language all its own, a full conversation in 3 seconds of eye contact. She saw him start to shake his head. They'd had drifters before. One had stolen a saddle. One had drunk himself useless inside a week. One had just disappeared between one morning and the next with $40 from the kitchen drawer. The word "no" was forming on Walter's lips as naturally and inevitably as it had formed a dozen times before. And that was when it happened. From somewhere behind the boy, from the road, from the distance, carried on the cold mountain air, came a sound. A sound that both Walter and Edna had heard before and hoped never to hear again. Cattle in trouble. Not the low complaint of hungry animals or the shuffle of a restless herd. This was the sharp, carrying bawl of cattle that are frightened, pushed, moving somewhere they don't want to go. Callum Reed turned before either of them could speak. He looked toward the south pasture where the fence was down. "Your herd is moving," he said, very calm, already putting his hat back on. "South fence is down and something's pushed them through. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in the tree line and you won't round them up till morning." He looked at Walter. "I need a horse," he said, "and I need it now." Walter gave him the horse. He did it without thinking, which was not something Walter Marsh did. He was a deliberate man, a man who weighed things. But there are moments when the body acts before the mind finishes the argument, and this was one of them. He pointed at the bay gelding in the near corral and said, "Take him," and Callum Reed was already moving. The boy could ride. That was the first thing Edna saw, watching from the fence while Walter hitched up the wagon with the speed of a man 30 years younger. Callum had the bay moving before he was fully in the saddle, handling the horse with the loose, economical confidence of someone for whom riding is not a skill, but a language. The way some people play music, not thinking about the notes, just saying what needs to be said. He went over the hill and out of sight. Walter climbed up beside Edna on the fence rail without a word, and they waited. 22 minutes later, Callum came back over the hill with all 31 head of cattle moving in a compact, calm group in front of him. All 31, Edna counted. He hadn't lost a single animal. Behind the cattle trotted a figure that resolved itself, as it got closer, into Hector, the border collie, who had apparently decided somewhere in the last half hour to transfer his loyalty entirely to this stranger on the bay horse. Hector was running the left flank of the herd with the focused intensity of a dog who has finally been given work worthy of his talents, and he glanced at Walter and Edna as he passed with an expression that could only be described as, "I found someone who knows what he's doing." Callum brought the herd into the north pasture, closed the gate, and rode back to where the Marshes were standing. He dismounted and handed Walter the reins. "2 places the fence is down," he said, not breathing hard. "There's also a section on the east side that's been pushed out from the inside. Looks like something's been testing it. Could be a bull getting restless. Could be something spooked them from the other side of the tree line. I'd want to walk it in the morning." Walter looked at his cattle. He looked at the boy. He looked at Edna. Edna said nothing. She didn't have to. "There's a room at the back of the barn," Walter said. "It's not much. Straw tick mattress and a blanket. There's a wash basin on the nail by the door." Callum Reed nodded. "That's more than I had last night." "Supper's at 6, Edna said. "We don't wait." "Yes, ma'am." She watched him lead the bay back to the corral, untack him properly, check his feet before turning him out. Every step right, nothing showy, just right. She turned and walked back toward the house. "I know," Walter said behind her. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." In the weeks that followed, Callum Reed proved useful in the way that certain people are useful. Not because they try hard or make a performance of their effort, but because they simply see what needs doing and do it. He repaired the fence line, all of it, walking every foot of the 400-acre perimeter with wire and pliers and the patient, methodical attention of someone who understands that the quality of your boundary determines the quality of your sleep. He fixed the water trough, not just patched it, but rebuilt the cracked section with stone and mortar he'd ground himself, so it would hold through freeze and thaw. He found a weakness in the barn roof before winter found it first, and spent 2 days on top of it in October cold, replacing shingles with the single-minded focus of a man with something to prove, though who he was proving it to was not entirely clear. He was good with the cattle, better than good. He had the gift of stillness around animals, that rarest of ranching qualities, the ability to move through a herd without the herd knowing you've moved through it, to read the group's mood the way a sailor reads the sea. Walter watched him work the cattle one morning and didn't say anything, but Edna saw her husband's face and knew what it meant. The boy was as good as their son had been, maybe better. She didn't let herself think about that for long. Callum ate supper with them every evening at 6 o'clock and was not late once. He was quiet at the table, not sullen quiet, just the quiet of someone who listens more than he speaks, which Edna had always found to be a mark of either wisdom or damage, and she was not yet sure which this was. He asked questions about the land, where the water ran in spring, which pastures grew thick and which went sparse in dry years. The questions of someone building a map inside their head, learning a place the way you learn a person, slowly, by paying attention to what they tell you without meaning to. Walter answered him. Every evening, a little more. Edna watched this and said nothing, and thought things she didn't say, because there was something about Callum Reed that she couldn't settle. Not a wrongness, nothing like that. He was honest. She had a sense for dishonesty sharpened by 61 years, and this boy had none of it. He worked without being watched. He never went into the house uninvited. He treated them with a respect that was not performed, the kind of respect that lives in small gestures, stepping aside on a narrow path, holding a gate open, asking before he changed anything. It was something else. It was the way he never talked about where he'd come from. Not evasively, not with the sharp deflections of a man hiding something criminal, more the way a person doesn't talk about a wound that is still too fresh. The careful circling, the gentle steering of conversation away from certain territories. Kansas originally. Working ranches since I was 15. 4 years of silence in those 2 sentences. 4 years that had turned a Kansas boy into someone walking alone through the Colorado mountains with risoled boots and a 2-day-old cut on his face. One evening in November, when the first real snow had come and they were sitting after supper with the fire going and the wind pushing at the windows, Edna set down her mending and said, "Callum, what happened in Kansas?" Walter looked up from his book. Callum was quiet for a long moment, looking at the fire. "My father's ranch," he said finally. "I worked it with him from the time I could lift a fence post. My mother died when I was 12. It was just us." He paused. "He died 2 years ago, left the ranch to me." "And?" Edna said. "And I was 19 and I didn't know enough. I made bad decisions. Borrowed against the land when the herd got sick, thought I could recover it by spring. He looked at his hands. I couldn't. The bank took it in April of '77. I had $30 and what I could carry. The fire crackled. I've been moving since, he said. Working where I can, trying to... He stopped, started again. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I just know I can't stop moving yet. Edna picked up her mending. You've been trying to find some... And? Edna said. And I was 19 and I didn't know enough. I made bad decisions. Borrowed against the land when the herd got sick. Thought I could recover it by spring. He looked at his hands. I couldn't. The bank took it in April of '77. I had $30 and what I could carry. The fire crackled. I've been moving since, he said. Working where I can. Trying to... He stopped, started again. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I just know I can't stop moving yet. Edna picked up her mending. You've been trying to find something worth stopping for, she said. Callum looked at her. She did not look up from her needle. Most people are, she said. There's no shame in it taking a while. He had approached Walter Marsh twice in the past year about the broken bow. Walter had said no, twice. The second time he'd said it with a rifle in his hands, which had ended the conversation. Now Pell was back, with two men who wore their guns low and looked at the house with the flat assessment of people who have been paid to discourage. Walter went for the rifle. Wait, Edna said. Edna, wait. She went to the barn. Callum was already awake. He was standing at the barn door with his coat on, watching the three horses at the gate with the same careful, unhurried attention he gave everything. Hector was pressed against his leg, every muscle in the dog's body vibrating at a frequency that would have been inaudible to anyone who didn't know him. You know those men? Callum asked. The one in front has been trying to take this ranch for a year. Callum was quiet for a moment. Is your husband going to do something that makes this worse? Edna almost smiled despite herself. He's considering it. Callum stepped out of the barn. He walked to the gate without hurrying, without reaching for anything. Just walked, straight-backed, easy, in the way of someone who has decided that the way you approach a thing determines half of how it goes. He stopped at the fence. Help you? He said. Pell looked down at him from the saddle. He was a heavy-set man in a good coat, with a full beard and the soft hands of someone who hires the difficult work done. I'm here to speak with Walter Marsh. Mr. Marsh isn't available. I manage operations here. You can speak with me. A beat. Pell's eyes moved to the house, then back. And who are you? Callum Reed. I've been running this ranch since September. He let that settle. If you have business with the broken bow, you have business with me. The two men flanking Pell shifted in their saddles. I have an offer for Marsh, Pell said. A fair one. The land isn't producing what it should. He's an old man. This winter's going to be hard. The tone was soft, reasonable, the tone of someone explaining an inevitability. I'm trying to help him see what's in his best interest. Mr. Marsh's best interest, Callum said, is for you to take your offer back to Pueblo. Pell's expression didn't change. Son, I think you're misunderstanding your position here. I think you're misunderstanding mine. The two flanking riders looked at each other. Because Callum Reed was 19 years old and slight, and standing at a fence in the dark with no visible weapon, and he was not afraid. Not performing calm, actually calm, the way an animal is calm when it has decided that this is where it stands. It is a different quality entirely, and the two riders, who had spent their professional lives reading men, felt the difference. There are three of you, Callum said. There's one of me at this fence. But there is a man inside that house with a rifle who has been waiting for an excuse to use it for a year. And if anything happens to me, You'll have given him one. He looked at Pell. Do you want this land enough to bleed for it tonight? A long silence. The wind came down off the mountain and moved through the dark. Pell looked at Callum for a long time. Then he looked at the house, at the dark window where the shape of Walter Marsh was visible, backlit with the rifle. This conversation isn't finished, Pell said. I expect not, Callum said. Come back in daylight. I'll make coffee. Pell turned his horse. The three of them rode back down the road and were swallowed by the dark. Callum stood at the gate until the sound of hoofbeats faded entirely. Then he turned around. Walter Marsh was standing on the porch with the rifle, and he was looking at Callum with an expression that Edna, watching from the doorway, had not seen on her husband's face in years. It was the way he had looked at their son, Thomas, before. That night, Walter Marsh did something he had not done since the winter of '74. He opened the bottle of good whiskey. Not the cooking whiskey, the good one. The one that lived at the back of the shelf and came out only for things that warranted it. He poured 2 glasses and pushed one across the table to Callum without asking. Callum looked at it, then at Walter. You stood your ground, Walter said. They would have come back worse if I'd showed them any give. I know. Walter turned his glass in his hands. I've been trying to show them no give for a year, but a year wears you down. He looked at the table. I'm 63 years old, and I've got 400 acres and 30 head of cattle, and I can't work it the way it needs working. I knew that going into this winter. Pell knew it too. He paused. That's what gives a man like that his power. He waits for you to get tired. He'll come back, Callum said. He will. Then we'll need to make a plan. Walter looked at him. We. Callum was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face. The careful look of a person approaching something important and wanting to approach it right. I lost my father's land, he said. I was 19 and I made bad decisions and I lost it. And I have thought about that every day for 2 years. He looked at Walter. I don't want to watch someone else lose theirs. The fire moved in the grate. Edna, sitting with her mending in the corner, did not look up, but she had stopped sewing. Walter was quiet for a long time. Then he said, My son is dead. I know, Callum said. I'm sorry. He would have been 24 this February. Walter turned his glass. He knew this land the way you know it. The water, the pasture. Which pastures go sparse in dry years. He looked at Callum. You've been asking the same questions he used to ask. A silence. I didn't know that, Callum said. No. Walter finished his whiskey, poured another. I have a lawyer in Durango. Good man. I've been thinking about something since September, since you fixed that water trough without being asked. He put the bottle down. I want to make you an offer. Callum waited. Work this land with me through the winter. In the spring, if it's still working, if you still want to stay, I'll draw up a partnership agreement. 30% of the operation, not wages, ownership. Walter looked at him steadily. In 10 years, when I can't work it anymore, you'd have first right to buy the rest. At a fair price, not a fire sale. The room was very quiet. Callum looked at the table. Why? He asked. Because you're good, Walter said. And because you stood at that fence tonight and you weren't afraid and you didn't do anything foolish. And because... He stopped, started again. Because this land deserves someone who'll love it. And I think you might. Callum looked up. His eyes were wet. He didn't look away, didn't try to hide it. He just let it be there, the way an honest person lets a true thing be true. I'll earn it, he said. I know you will. Walter said. That's why I'm asking. Edna set down her mending and stood up. She walked to the kitchen. She came back with 3 glasses and the good whiskey because Walter had forgotten to pour one for her, which he had been doing since 1848. And some things were beyond changing. She sat down at the table. Well, she said, now that that's settled. And for the first time since the night of September, Callum Reed smiled. Pell came back in January. He came with a lawyer and a document and a tone of patient inevitability, and he found Callum at the fence line and Walter at the barn door, and Hector positioned at the property line with the focused disapproval of a very small but extremely committed guardian. Callum said, "The Broken Bow is not for sale. We are registered with the county as a partnership operation. Any future approach should be directed to our attorney in Durango, whose name and address I will write down for you." Pell looked at Walter. Walter looked back at him with the rifle in the crook of his arm and 31 years of possession on his face. Pell left. He did not come back. The winter was hard, as Walter had said it would be. 3 weeks of cold that cracked the water lines and kept the cattle penned in the near pasture, and made the mornings a negotiation between what needed doing and what the body was willing to do. Callum worked through it without complaint, which Walter noticed without comment, which was how respect moved between them, quietly, through what was observed and acknowledged without needing to be said. By the time March came and the first grass showed on the south pasture and the creek ran free again under the last of the ice, something had settled at the Broken Bow Ranch that had not been there since the winter of '74. Not the absence of grief. Edna still climbed the hill behind the barn some evenings and stood at the grave marker and said things into the mountain air that were between her and her son alone. That would always be there. Grief doesn't leave. It just learns to share the house with other things. But the other things were there now. The sound of 2 men working in the barn in the morning, talking about fence line and pasture rotation and the price of feed in Durango. The sound of Hector running perimeter checks with the self-important diligence of a dog who takes his responsibilities seriously. The sound of supper at 6 o'clock and the conversation that went longer now, ranging across the land and the seasons and the slow accumulation of plans. The sound of a house that had found its footing again. On the first warm evening of April, Edna found Callum sitting on the top rail of the south pasture fence, watching the cattle move through the new grass in the late light. She climbed up beside him. She was 61 years old, and her knees reminded her of it, but she managed. They sat in silence for a while. "You wrote to someone," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen the envelope on the table that morning. "A girl in Durango," he said. He was quiet for a moment. "We knew each other before, when I was still—" He gestured vaguely at the road, at the past. "Before." "And?" "I don't know. I wrote. We'll see." Edna looked at the cattle. At the south fence line, straight and solid, every post driven right. At the water trough by the near barn, rebuilt so well it would outlast all of them. "When Walter and I came here," she said, "we had nothing but the 2 of us and a piece of paper that said we owned something we hadn't built yet. Most days that first year I thought we'd made a terrible mistake." She paused. "But you know what we had?" Callum looked at her. "Somewhere to stop," she said, "after years of not having it. Somewhere that was ours, that we were responsible for, that needed us." She looked at him. "That changes a person, Callum, having somewhere to stop." He was quiet. Below them, the cattle grazed in the long afternoon light, and Hector made his rounds with great importance, and the San Juan Range held its snow on the high peaks against the blue April sky. "I know," Callum said. He did. He had known it, he thought, since September, when he'd walked up a road with resoled boots and nothing to lose, and a woman had opened a door before he knocked. You don't always know the moment when the drifting ends. Sometimes you only know it looking back. But it ends.